So, morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. It's great to see so many people. I'm Lynn. I'm the Operations Director at Shared Lives Plus. Nice to see everyone. I'm going to pass you to the next person on my screen, who is Nicola.
Hi, I'm Nicola Watson. I am the Home Share and Shared Lives Nations Officer at Shared Lives Plus. I will pass you to Liz.
Hello everyone, I'm Liz Collins. I'm the Strategic Advice Data and Support Officer, but I also work very closely with the membership team as well. I'm going to pass you on to Kathy.
Morning everyone, happy Shared Lives Week. I'm Kathy McSweeney and I'm the Membership Support Manager in the membership team. And I will pass on to Michael.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael. I'm the Senior Policy and External Affairs Lead for Shared Lives Plus. Nice to see you all.
You need to pass it to Bex.
It's Bex.
You almost ran out of people, Michael, and I was just scanning through going, am I going to have anyone to pass on to, or am I the final? Everyone, I'm Rebecca. I might have spoken to some of you before. I'm the Support and Engagement Officer, which means that I hang around on the support line most days and come out and meet carers. I noticed there's a couple of Stockport carers on. I came out to see the Stockport carers recently. And I'll be going out to Stoke today if there's anyone from Stoke in, and Wakefield tomorrow if anyone's attending the Wakefield meetup tomorrow too.
How are you doing, Becky?
I think it's very, very slowly getting there. So I'm just going to try and share my slides.
Well, for anyone who doesn't know, this is Becky. I'll do an introduction for her.
Hi, yes, I'm Becky. I am the Senior Support and Engagement Manager in the membership team. So yes, I'm just going to try and share.
Happy Shared Lives Week, everybody. You can just see Sarah's just wishing everyone a happy Shared Lives Week. If there's anything happening in your area, do let us know what it is, what you're doing. Are you up to anything? There's some great stuff going on.
Can you see that?
It's getting there.
Yeah.
Does it? Yeah. What does it look like? Because to me, it's got it's like got a little box on it, or does it just?
Yeah, it's got an audience window. And close that off. There's a little cross, a tiny cross at the top.
Sorry, guys, I think I've never done this before, and I have done it before quite recently, but apparently it's not happy. Okay. Oh, goodness me. Right, let's get started. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. It might not be super clear what we're actually chatting with you guys about. We wanted to kind of shed a little bit of light on the things that we, particularly in the membership team, but also more generally across Shared Lives Plus, the things that maybe we don't talk about as much, or you just, because we're just getting on with it, it's just something that isn't as present. We don't shout about it. So we're going to go through the topics here. So I'm going to talk about the roots of shared lives and why that matters. Kathy's going to cover the model. Nicola is going to talk about nations, suitable since she is all the way up in the north of Scotland today. Bex is going to cover mediation. Lynn is talking about partnerships. Liz is on data, and Michael's on advocacy. So just a few light topics for us to get through today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions, pop them in the chat and we will pick them up at the end. Okay. So why do our roots matter? I'm a very visual thinker, so please bear with me, but this is my metaphor for why the roots of Shared Lives matter still today in everything that we do at Shared Lives Plus, and also the things that you guys do. Basically, I think about it in terms of like plants. So the Shared Lives, the way that it's grown is very organic, like a wildflower meadow, if you will. So there's lots of very beautiful things, but it hasn't necessarily grown in a very ordered way. If we had been more strategic, at the beginning, maybe we would have had lots of nice pot plants, also beautiful, maybe not quite as varied. Excuse me, maybe not quite as varied. But for us, Shared Lives Plus, as the gardeners, it is bit more of a challenge to tend to something that has grown organically than something that has grown strategically. It is, I would argue it's more beautiful and more varied for that fact, but that just kind of gives you an idea of some of the challenges that we sometimes face. It comes from this kind of idea of growing organically. Okay, so why did we grow organically? Because it all came from one little small idea, basically. So there was an organisation that we still work with that are one of our shared life schemes, PSS, based in Liverpool. And they started the scheme with a £3,000 cheque and a lady called Sue Newton, who was hired to run this project, basically. Originally, it actually started out as older people who had been in institutions for their whole lives, not necessarily people with learning disabilities, and they would go to a volunteer for respite, and it was volunteers. So that looks very different to obviously what Shared Lives looks like today. This was kind of in response to, there was like a general crackdown on institutions. Like people were beginning to realize that like it wasn't right to have you know, elderly people, people with learning disabilities, people who could well live within the community, as we know, completely separate. So that kind of movement had started. You can see in this little clip that I've put here, the institutional mindset. This is from 10 years earlier, an article, 1967. And it just, I mean, for example, it uses the word a subnormal population. You can see it's a completely different mentality of putting people in institutions, and that really, there started to be a real kickback against that. And one of those institutions was Rainhill in Liverpool. So Rainhill was closed towards the end of the 1970s, and obviously Shared Lives started in 1978. Well, not Shared Lives, sorry, it was Adult Placement Project. But it was just this one project. So there wasn't this big grand plan, there wasn't this big blueprint, and there was nothing that had been done like it before. So this is just to give you guys a little bit of a timeline on it. So as I said, it started very organically, 1978, and those little bubbles kind of represent the way that it popped up elsewhere in the country. So across the country, other institutions started to close down, and other local authorities were looking around thinking, what alternatives have we got? And so, you know, they looked at the adult placement scheme in Liverpool, and it started to kind of grow in different areas. But there wasn't any kind of central organizing body. There were a few organizations that then towards the end of the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s started to work more closely together in the North, West and the Midlands. And then out of that, they created a single body, NAPS, NAPS, or the National Association of Adult Placement Services. So that started in 1992. So when you're thinking about our work today, like the model itself long pre-existed what Shared Lives Plus as a central organizing body had long predated us as a body. So we've kind of come in retrospectively and tried to organize things, and that doesn't, you know, that can make it a bit complicated. But as you can see in the picture here, we tried to bring everybody into one bubble, tried to bring everybody together so that we could be that centrally organizing force. We did then have a little blip in the year 2000. That is important to know because it really dictates a lot of our work today, which is the Care Standards Act. And some of you may know about this, but it basically meant that Shared Lives carers, who were then called adult placement carers, were expected to kind of run their Shared Lives homes like care homes. And that meant that there was a real decrease in placements and carers because it just was really, really difficult. So we're keen to never, ever go back to that. basically. So that kind of is a real impetus for us to keep on top of the legislation and the advocacy that Michael's going to talk about later. Thankfully, that only lasted 4 years. And in 2004, the burden of regulation moved to the shared life schemes, then called adult placement schemes. And then in 2010, we turned into the organisation that you know us as today, Shared Lives Plus, and the model went from being adult placement to Shared Lives. So that's just a super quick rundown of how our roots kind of shape everything that we do as an organisation, and also shape the model across the country, and some of those tensions that you guys definitely bring to us, you know. Okay, so that is the root, and I'm going to pass you on to Kathy, and she's going to pick up the theme of how the model changes depending on the context. So I will pass over to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Becky. In the membership team, we often say that we have 149 shared life schemes and 149 ways of doing things. And this harks back to the organic growth that Becky was talking about. But the way this has happened is because that most shared life schemes sit within local authorities, but about a third of our schemes are independent, which means they're run by charities, community interest companies, long arm trading companies, or private organisations. Each local authority and organisation has its own policy and procedure frameworks and their own aims and objectives, which all have a bearing on how they run shared lives. Not only that, but the area of the country, the size of the scheme, and the client group that the scheme predominantly works with will also affect how the scheme operates and presents shared lives. We operate in all 4 nations, and we have schemes who support just a few households, or to those that support 500 people. Alongside that, each of the 149 shared life schemes can choose one, all, or a combination of the 3 types of arrangement. So that is live-in or long-term, short breaks or respite, and day support. We know that about half the people that use shared lives are in live-in arrangement. About 25% of people then access short breaks, and then the other final 25% have day support. Someone may have respite because they still live at home with their family, or because they're in a long-term shared lives arrangement and go to another shared lives carer for their short breaks. Day support in shared lives is a growing area of provision across the country, particularly since COVID. So we have the landscape of schemes across the UK. We have the 3 types of arrangements, but we also have the client groups that are supported in shared lives. Traditionally, and still to this day, people with learning disabilities are the largest group of people that who access shared lives. But there are growing numbers of people with mental ill health and older adults who now regularly access shared lives across all of the arrangement types. Can I have my next slide, please? In answering inquiries from both shared life schemes and shared lives carers, I'm often asked, have you heard of this situation before? Is it still shared lives? Given the time the model has existed, the national landscape and the range of needs that can be met within shared lives, it could feel like there is infinite scope and flexibility, but there are still hard edges to the model. These are needed so that shared lives still fits within its geographical, legal and regulation boundaries. Sometimes an arrangement just isn't shared lives, but this does not mean that it's not successful or that it isn't right for that person. It just means that it's not shared lives and it will work better in another space or framework that's better suited to it. Where the boundaries of the shared lives model have not been respected or tightly observed in the past, we've seen it cause major complications that later down the line need to be rectified. I'm just going to sum it up as cleaning up a spill is a lot messier than just putting the lid on the bottle. Can I have my next slide, please? However, this doesn't mean that the model hasn't expanded or flexed to meet the changing world that it finds itself in. In more recent times, shared lives has developed to offer support to parents with disabilities, young people leaving care, or adults who have dementia. Over the years, there have also been development projects for, amongst others, home from hospital arrangements and for people who've experienced domestic abuse. These projects have not always produced the results we expected or been as successful as we hoped or even looked like what we planned. But what we have learned is that Shared Lives is adept at providing all kinds of arrangements for people who may not fit into traditional services, who have not found somewhere they can call home or somewhere where they can be their true authentic self. So Shared Lives Plus will continue to strive to show that shared life schemes for 50 years before now, and hopefully 50 years in the future, have and will support people to find a home, a family and a community. Shared Lives Plus works across the whole of the UK, and I work mainly with shared life schemes in England, but Nicola Watson, our Nations and Home Share Officer, supports our shared life schemes in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and she helps them navigate their local geographic, legal and regulation landscapes.
Thanks, Kathy. I was just going to be talking about a model.
Oh, have we lost Nicola?
That is such bad timing.
Yeah.
It was all going so terribly well.
Oh dear.
It looks like she's back.
No, she's back.
It's
Am I
moving.
back?
Nicola. Yay.
It's come up, your internet is, the connection is unstable.
Oh,
You know, that is good timing, isn't it? Oh, well, tell me, because to me it looks like I'm just talking, I'm just rabbiting on. So tell me if you can't hear me.
Okay, we'll let you know.
Yes,
Happy
I was
day.
just, as I was saying to myself, that across the nations of the UK, Shared Lives has evolved reacting to, just as Kathy said, the different contexts, demographics and legislative landscape. For instance, in Scotland, Shared Lives is available in 15 local authorities, from Dumfries and Galloway in the south to Shetland in the north, though there is a lot of interest across Scotland to develop Shared Lives more widely. 21% of people who draw on Shared Lives support in Scotland are living with dementia or age-related support needs, and across the UK that figure is only 4%, possibly in response to the high ageing population in Scotland. The most common type of arrangement or support drawn on is day support, and in Scotland Shared Lives carers can support up to 2 people at any one time, and schemes are regulated by the Care Inspectorate. And the Scottish Government are particularly interested in Shared Lives support for parents with learning disabilities. And at the bottom of each, I've kind of got some of the regulations that each nation works within. Can I get the next one, Becky?
Yeah, sorry, Nicola, just one sec. If you've got a question, just pop it in the chat and we'll pick it up at the end.
Thanks. In Wales, Shared Lives is well established. Each local authority area is served by a Shared Lives scheme. So I have 8 scheme members and they operate and are registered with and inspected by the Care Inspectorate Wales. Shared Lives carers in Wales support those aged 18 plus, and they can support 3 people at any one time, same as England. The number of people supported by Shared Lives in Wales actually increased last year by 12%, even though the numbers across the UK decreased slightly. Again, in Wales, same as Scotland, there's a higher than the UK average number of people who are supported with dementia or a support need related to older age, as well as there being a higher percentage of people with a mental health need, because that's just 7% across the UK. Interestingly, one scheme in Wales provides the greatest number of day support arrangements to people in the UK. And again, there's their different regulations in Wales. And in Northern Ireland, there are schemes supporting those with learning disabilities and older people. And one scheme for older people covers the whole of Northern Ireland. Shared Life schemes in Northern Ireland can support people aged 18 plus, and they're registered and inspected by the Regulation and Quality Improvement Authority. And again, they've got their own regulations. Thanks, that's it. This is my last one. And what does this mean for shared life schemes, carers, and the people they support? Well, the different legislation means different requirements, which could mean a change for carers and supported people if they are moving between the nations. And it encourages us all to think reflectively about our practice and the model, rather than, this is the model and this is how it's always done. We're thinking, how does it work to suit our local area, all within the model that Kathy has discussed. And it really demonstrates the flexibility of the shared lives model to respond to that local context. But no matter where you are in the UK, shared lives centres around matching based on shared interests and values, offering choice on who provides you with support and how you live your life. I am going to pass you over to Rebecca Day, our Membership Engagement and Support Officer, to chat about mediation. Thanks.
Hello again, everyone. I'm just going to unmute myself. Sorry, struggling to unmute myself. I've done it now. I'm the Support and Engagement Officer for Shared Lives Plus, which means that most of the time I'm on the support line taking carers calls, which can range from anything about queries from guidance and who pays for what on holidays, or issues around mobility vehicles, to really serious safeguardings and referrals to our solicitors, Stevenson's. But I've been asked today to talk about mediation, and we're highlighting this to carers today as it's something that we don't often talk about. We don't often have to do them. They are a bit of a rarity, but we have in the past done them with some success. So it's nice to speak to you about them today. So as a mediator, I'm sitting in a position where I'm trying to emphasise the issues around communication between the carers and their schemes, and hopefully uncover some hidden problems or issues that are stopping the carer and the scheme from progressing with their relationship. So I facilitate the discussion about what needs to happen next, future goals for the carers and objectives that need to be made. And this is all done co-produced with the carers and the scheme, with the intent of rebuilding the relationship between the two parties. So when anybody asks for a mediation, it means that they've got to a point where they feel they can no longer work effectively or communicate with the person that they're expected to work with on a day-to-day basis. So mediation is trying to remove the barrier to communication. And that's the most important part of mediation. And we do that by fostering empathy and learning from the other person's experience. So a lot of us believe that we spend our days listening to our friends and our families and our colleagues to try and understand their perspectives. But what I'm suggesting is that most of us listen on a surface level, and we don't really listen on a deeper level. We see things through our own lens. We see things through our own view of what we need to do that day, what we need to get done. And we don't really receive the full meaning of what we're being told by the person, and what extent that meaning has for them. So in a recent mediation, for example, the scheme felt that the carer had really lost their understanding or lost their willingness to understand what it was that the scheme meant by the ethos of shared lives. The carer, however, felt that the scheme couldn't see past the recommendations that had been placed on them, to the effect that it was actually having an effect on the carer's day-to-day life, and it was imposing on normal family life. Sometimes we're in a situation where we just can't find a route out of a particular impasse, because we're living in that situation, and because we're, as I said before, seeing it through our perspective and what that means for us. So in that situation, we were seeing it through the views of a frustrated manager and a really exhausted carer. The mediator in that situation needs to try and express the feelings of both parties to enable each other to kind of shift that perspective a little bit. It also allows people the time and space to digest difficult information. When we're busy, we're often just checking things off a to-do list. And if we think someone is stopping us from doing that, they become a problem in our eyes. Now, I'm not saying that mediation will completely change the mindset of the people who go to the mediation, but what it can offer us is the opportunity to move forward and create that plan, and put next steps in place. And it offers us the opportunity to start afresh with a plan that we're all invested in. it's very unlikely that a person will refuse to go ahead with an agreed plan if they have been involved in its creation and have, have been on board since the beginning. This can't, it can't be forced on to the carer via the scheme. It really has to be something that is done side by side. So going through the mediation process offers everybody the opportunity also to take some responsibility for the reasons that they find themselves in mediation. I recently worked on a mediation and the carer had told me privately that what they really wanted was an apology from the scheme. And during the mediation, the carer was offered the apology that they really wanted by the head of service who had joined the mediation. And it meant a huge amount to them. And after that was offered, it also meant that the carer felt able to take some responsibility for the situation that had happened and take some accountability for what they had done. There had been a mistake that was made that was not reported to the scheme. So that little shift in perspective from the head of service really meant that the carer could kind of access their own feelings around it as well. And it was an excellent outcome for everybody involved. The scheme were happy at the end, the carer was happy, we created a plan, and as of this date, everything's going fine with them. So we always try and endeavour to remain independent. And in that situation, we had a member of the team who was supporting the scheme. We had a member of the team who was supporting the carer, and we had myself acting as mediator in a position of neutrality over the whole thing. And when we move on from mediation, we kind of ask, well, what do we want it to look like after this? So we're aiming for a bit of clarity on both sides of, what does this look like for the scheme? What does it look like for the carer? And sometimes that means that the carer and the scheme can continue as they were before and let bygones be bygones. Sometimes it offers us the chance to learn from the situation. Certainly working on these mediations has altered my perspective and has altered the way that perhaps I advise carers now. But sometimes it also means that the people involved decide that they can't work with one another anymore. And so the plan might then be, how can we effectively transition the supported person out of that placement and into some, into a different placement? And to do that in the most supporting and most loving way that we can. So our mediations tend to happen online. We have done some face-to-face in the past, but as Nicola's already shown you all, that the carers are based all around the country. So a lot of it is done via Teams meetings. We put a lot of prep into our mediations also. We have to kind of go through all of our notes on the situation, often sometimes going back years and years over situations that have arisen for the carer and for the scheme. And then after mediation, we also try and offer pastoral support to our schemes and our carers so that they're, because often once the mediation's taken place, it can be a great relief for everybody. But sometimes it can also feel like, it can also feel quite exhausting. And so we're there to kind of support pastorally as well. And we do everything always in line with the Shared Lives Plus guidance model and our ethos of keeping everybody safe and helping everybody to thrive within Shared Lives Plus. So my turn now to hand over to Lynn Harrison, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about our partnerships.
Thanks, Bex. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, we work closely with a number of trusted partners. You can see them here on this slide, who tailor their offer to our unique model. Shared Lives is quite unique, as we all know, so our unique model of care. So all of our partners, we make sure understand the Shared Lives model. So there's no surprises if it comes to things like claims or tax returns and things like that. You'll have heard us talk many times about Towergate. They've been our partner for a number of years now. They provide bespoke insurance package specifically designed for Shared Lives carers and the Shared Lives model of care. It's not an off-the-shelf package, so we're really confident it fits all the needs of our Shared Lives carers and the risks and situations that some carers face from time to time. We purchased 2 policies from Towergate. Towergate are an insurance broker. This always gets quite it's not complicated, but it feels a bit complicated. Towergate are the broker. And so we purchased from them a policy which covers all of our carers. We buy it in bulk so that we can pass the savings on to carers for legal expenses cover. And we also purchase a policy which provides public liability insurance, both of which are needed. CQC say that all carers should have that. It's a requirement in England. It's strongly recommended in the nations that that insurance is in place, as with household insurance, that meets the needs of shared lives too. So if we start on legal expenses, the legal expenses cover is provided by an insurer who Towergate source for us as our broker, and that insurer is called ARAG. ARAG have then they will provide insurance, so anything that goes wrong for a carer who's covered by that policy, they will be covered to get advice from our solicitors. So we work with Stevenson's, and many of you might have been on the webinar with Stevenson's where they talked about safeguarding and the kind of things that they support as part of this legal expense cover. So Stevenson's completely understand shared lives. We're really pleased with the results since we moved. We did used to work with Jackson Lees, who weren't quite as, they didn't understand the model quite as much as Stevenson's. We're really pleased with Stevenson's. So you would go to Stevenson's if there was an allegation, if a carer has an allegation made against them, or if they were for some reason going through a de-approval process and they felt it was unfair, they could go to Stevenson's for advice. Their insurance would cover them for Stevenson's solicitors' time. And if in rare cases we get to a stage where we're in court or anything like that happens, all of those costs will be covered too. So they're completely covered for any allegations made against them by friends, family, and they're also covered just for the support if they're going through any of those tough times. The legal expenses cover also provides general legal advice, so free advice on any subject at all, as long as you're a Shared Lives Plus member. And it provides tax advice, slightly different to the advice we'll talk about in a bit, that BK Plus and BW McFarlane provide. This is, if I give you an example of a carer who didn't know that they had to register as self-employed, went through many years not paying tax, provided them with a huge bill, you know, felt that they hadn't been given the right advice, and there was a case on that. So there's specific legal tax advice as part of that legal insurance too. So that's something that perhaps we do forget to tell people sometimes, but there's a specialist tax line there too. Luckily not needed enough. We laugh sometimes and say there's someone there dusting off the you know, the dust when the phone rings, because that's not used that much, luckily. So that's our legal expense cover. That is provided to all our Shared Lives members, whether they're on basic or full membership, just comes as standard. Our full membership provides public liability insurance, and that just covers carers going out and about, but in the home, outside in the community. It covers any support carers that are named on the care plan. So it provides that overall support for going out into the community, being in your house if you were accused of, they say negligence, which is, it's the wrong word. I don't like it called negligence, but if a carer wasn't looking and someone did something through a brick against a window or whatever, the argument is that the carer was negligent. They weren't looking. Of course, we can't all be looking 24 hours a day. So that's what public liability, it will cover them for anything like that, any claims against them if they were in someone's house with the person they supported and there was an accident and something, and there was a claim made against them, it covers them for that kind of thing. So just to give you an idea of how this support is arranged, every year we will meet, Shared Lives Plus will meet with Towergate, and we'll discuss claims that have been made in the past. And we'll discuss whether the model's changed, and the insurers will do a risk assessment and they'll think whether anything's changed. And that will mean that sometimes when our premium might go up, there'll have been a few claims they've paid out. They feel that we've stretched the model too much. That hasn't ever happened, but that's one thing that we're always conscious of. If we stretch the model too much, they might say, oh, the risk's increasing there. So we do that every year. We'll talk to them. And so far, we've never had to put the costs up too much. The risks are fairly low. It is a fairly, luckily, put something there just for that peace of mind when people need it. So we've said about Stevenson's, so ARAG introduced us to them. We did training with them. They came to talk to us. There's a real good partnership going on there so that they know and understand everything that could happen in shared lives. We've had problems with household insurance for a number of years now, probably about the last 2 years, and I know carers have called us saying they couldn't get insurance because they were a shared lives carer. They couldn't get insurance. Generally, the insurance world struggled for a couple of years. We're told that it's moving in the right direction now, not completely recovered, but they're getting there, and we've sourced now through Towergate a new household insurer, which we're really pleased about. Early indications are really positive. Carers are telling us the quotes are reasonable, competitive, and they've got that peace of mind that they are covered as a shared lives carer. And one thing to always be aware of with that is that we do have carers who'll come to us and say we've gone out to an insurer. They've said that, yeah, we've told them we're a shared lives carer, we're covered. They come to make a claim, and the insurer will say, you've got someone living with you who isn't part of your family. Well, that's a lodger. Oh, no, that's not covered on your cover. Well, I told you it was a shared lives carer. We didn't understand that meant you had someone living in your house. Your insurance is valid. So if you're going out to anyone else to get household insurance, always make sure that they understand what shared lives caring is and that they give you that in writing so that if you come to make a claim, you're covered. But do come to Towergate and get a quote from them if you're ready for any kind of your renewal for your household, because you would be covered for that. It also, we're pleased to say, covers malicious damage this new. We haven't had that for, I'd say, about 6 or 7 years, the household insurance that covers malicious damage. So we've got the household insurance there. So moving on, these are very interesting subjects, aren't they, to tax. We also partner with specialist tax advisors. Shared lives income can be confusing, as we all know, to general accountants as well. So we work with BK Plus, who are our favoured provider, and they will provide you with tax advice free of charge. Give them a ring. They'll advise you on tax. They'll advise you on benefits. They'll advise you on benefits for the people you support. They'll advise you on if you're transitioning from a foster carer to a shared lives carer. They've had many, many years supporting foster carers before they started to support shared lives carers. So we trust that they really know our model and they give good advice, get really good feedback, and do our patch chats and our webinars and workshops on tax and benefits too, and national insurance too. Don't forget your national insurance. And if anyone does want it, we've got a fact sheet which sets all this out about what you need to do regarding tax and self-employment and national insurance. We also work with BW McFarlane. We've worked with them for 15 years. BW McFarlane are more expensive, so they do tax returns, and so do BK Plus. If you want them to do your tax return, there is a charge for that, but they'll do the tax return. I think there's about £100 difference in charges, so we'd always favour BK Plus really, but it's not our choice, and some people prefer to stay with BW McFarlane because they've worked with them for years and we know they understand shared lives, so it's another offer there. Another area shared lives carers struggle with is mortgages sometimes. Some lenders don't recognise shared lives income. So we've worked with an organisation called Mortgage Brain. They do understand shared lives. They know the things that make it hard to get approval from lenders. They know the lenders who will be more understanding. And so we work with Mortgage Brain. If you are looking for a mortgage or your carers are looking for a mortgage, have a chat with them and they might be able to help if you're struggling. The only other partner that we probably haven't mentioned here on the slide is Blue Light. It took us months and months in 2021, I think it was, because shared lives carers weren't recognised to be able to get a Blue Light card. So we had many, many meetings with Blue Light trying to figure out how we could do this because shared lives carers don't have a payslip as such. And they finally agreed that we really did jump through hoops with this one. So they agreed that if a shared lives carer was a member of Shared Lives Plus, they could see that we always ask our schemes, are your carers approved? So they could have confidence that Shared Lives carers are approved. And so they've agreed that we at Shared Lives Plus can provide a letter It costs £4.99 for 2 years, but there's some great discounts. It's a really, really popular one. We were just having a look in the last quarter when Bex does her inductions with carers and stuff and mentions this. We had 79 requests in the last quarter for blue light cards. So it is quite a popular offer. So that is me. I'm done on our exciting partnership work. Who am I passing over to? Is it Michael? And I should know that.
That's me.
Liz, yeah.
Liz.
Thanks, Lynn. So I'm here to discuss data, but specifically is state of the sector. So I'm very quickly just going to talk about the primary purpose. So why do we ask for this data? I'm also just going to give an insight of the timeline, so how long it takes from start to finish. And I'm also going to talk about some further analysis that takes place and some additional resources that is created from the state of the sector data set. So the primary purpose then, just my next slide. Thanks. So the primary purpose then is the State of the Sector Annual Report. And what this report is an overview of how Shared Lives is across the UK and across the nations and the regions. And what's in this report is sort of like an overview of the total number of supported people, the total number of carers, and the total number of staff. We also showcase the primary support needs that we've catered for, the types of support, so your live-in, your short breaks, and your day support, and the age groups of supported people and carers in the UK and in the nations. So this report then, we share it with internally, and we share it with schemes. We share it around about September time. And not only do we share it with schemes and internally, we also use this as a conversation piece with commissioners, with adult services stakeholders, local authorities, nation governments, external researchers, to really just showcase the great work that's going across all the nations. And it's just like a foundation of knowledge and a great document that we get to share. And yeah, the next slide then is the timeline. So I'm not going to go into this into too much depth. It was just a quick visual that I could put together. But yeah, so at the beginning of the year, we do a sort of a pre-survey, and what that means is we look at all the feedback that we've had from previous surveys from all yourselves. We go through every single comment that you give to us. We take all that into consideration when we put together the questions and the format of the survey. So in January to March, we produce that survey. Not only do we do that online, but we also produce a Word version of the survey. And the purpose of that is to not only show schemes all the questions that we're asking, but to also give an alternative format or alternative method to provide those survey responses in, because we know that sometimes there's technical issues, or sometimes it's just easier just to fill in that Word documentation, especially if schemes have got data teams or admin that fill in the survey, and it's easier to have that Word version. So we produce 2 versions of that survey. The next period then between April and June. So sorry, Becky, if we just go back, sorry. Thank you. So between April and June then, we send the schemes the emails to ask for them to send in the response to us. And the reason that we send that in April is because we're asking for that year's period of data. That year is finalized in March, so April is a great time to ask schemes for that data. So that is the reason why we send that out in April. So yeah, so we contact schemes in April, ask for their responses, and then we will send a reminder out in June if we haven't heard anything. And that just gives us an opportunity to talk with schemes, because we're very open to the idea of extending deadlines. I know this year we put initially, I think it was the 30th of May. But for many reasons, schemes weren't able to commit to that, whether it be staff capacity. I know some schemes were changing data systems, so it wasn't necessarily easy to obtain that data. They were CQC inspections. So there's multiple reasons as to why that can't come through. And, you know, we're more than happy to accept that those are the circumstances. So please let us know if there's any sort of barriers, if there's any reasons why you can't send that in. We will be open to other ways of getting that data in. And that's where we currently are within this process at the moment. So we are currently chasing in those responses. Initially, we have had the best response that we've had to date. It's been a fantastic sort of initial response. So thank you so much if you've sent that response in. At the moment as well, we also get to start the data integrity sort of exercise. So all those responses that have come in, we can go through every single line of data, any data anomalies that have been flagged, we can just go back to schemes and just get some clarification. And yeah, so that we've sort of started that process a little earlier than what we would have done in previous years. And that's all thanks to those data responses that we've gotten initially. So again, thank you very much that we get to start that process a little bit earlier. So we're hoping to close the survey now, end of June, beginning of July. And then after that, we can start on to the next part of the process. We can finalize that data set. We can create that dashboard that we have that we can look at summarizing the UK. We can summarize nations, and we can further actually deep dive into certain regions. We can actually look at ICB areas within England. So it really just gives us a really strong data set to work with. And utilize that dashboard and to look at certain criterias and all things that we look at. And I'll further explain that when we look at the further analysis. And also in that process, then we'll start the reporting. So we'll gather all those statistics and that data, and we'll start producing our report and publishing that to you. We are currently on target to do that for September. Again, that is thanks to all the responses that we're getting in from all the schemes. So we are on target to get that sent out in September. And once we do that, then we can further look into some infographics and further analysis, which is on my next slide. So really, it was just to sort of highlight that the state of the sector data set is not just purely for that primary purpose of putting that report together. It is just like a foundation of data that we can use and further analyze into other areas, and we can look at certain things as I've highlighted on here. On the right side, I'll just quickly actually jump on that first. So we can collate a catalogue of charts, infographics. So some examples there then. So you've got a map of like how the carers looks across the nations and the regions, just by how many carers are in there, how many schemes are in every single region, and we can put together infographics. So for example, the last state of the sector, it was highlighted that 1 in 5 supported people had a support need of mental health. So it's really sort of interesting of what information that we get from that state of the sector, and we're able to put together that catalogue of chart and infographics. Returning back to the left side of the slide then, sorry. So this is the further analysis that takes place. And again, this is really crucial for us. It is a foundation of data that we have that we further explore. The first 2 yellow boxes then is the top level data. And what I mean by that is the total number of supported people, carers and staff. And we're able to make those comparisons from previous years. We now have 4 years worth of data. So that's really important for us to see how the growth of that and how the development of that has gone over the last 4 years. And the scheme sizes. So we have parameters, and we can establish which schemes are small, medium, large, and extra large. And that's based on how many supported people are in that scheme. And we can look at that trend analysis as well over the years. And that's really important for us to know as well. The next 2 boxes, the blue boxes, the top 10 carer growth and the top 10 supported people growth. So this was an exercise that we did sort of later on in the period last time. But however, we're going to look at it earlier on this year because we actually found some really important information from that. So when we look at the top level data, we establish which schemes have performed. We've got the top 10 from carer growth. We've got the top 10 for supported people growth. And we try and speak with those schemes and to get some lessons learned and say, you know, how have you achieved this? This is fantastic. And we speak to those schemes and we get the information from them. As I say, we're currently doing that exercise now, and we're putting a report together so we can share with everyone else, and to let you know, some good practices that have come out from that. And it's a really important exercise to get that further information from schemes. So as I say, it was something that we did later on. We're currently producing the report, so it will come out sort of like a similar sort of time as this year's State of the Sector, but it's almost like an add-on to State of the Sector that we will be working on a little bit earlier than we did last time. As well as the top 10, then we also look at carer recruitment data. So Carly Riley, our colleague, she's part of the carer recruitment team. We will pass on that carer data set, and we'll extract that and pass it on to that team, and they can further analyze that and what need that they need to use with that. So that's really important to help with that narrative and what work they're doing there. Another thing that we look at is the membership data. Of course, we're a membership team. So we look at the figures of the carers and the schemes, and we compare that with our membership figures. And again, we look more into that and do a deep dive into that as well. One last thing that we look at, this is not everything, this is just something that had come off the top of my head. There is a lot more, but one of the last things I'm going to mention is the care leavers data. And you might know our colleague Rachel Leslie. They're doing a program at the moment. They've got their own sort of data that they're currently collecting, which is kind of separate to State of the Sector, but we wanted to use State of the Sector as an opportunity to get more data on how the care leavers is doing at this current period in time. Just to see if it matches our narrative that we've currently got. So there's that optional section that we've got in State of the Sector this year, and we pass it on to the care leavers team, and they can further analyse that. We are developing a webinar in the near future to speak more about this further analysis, to talk more about State of the Sector. Basically, that is an opportunity to get feedback from schemes. If there's anything you think that we should put more interest in or more focus in, to get more feedback on what we're currently looking at. But it really is, this data is so crucial to us to do the work that we're doing. So we really are so grateful for every single response that we get in, because every line makes such a difference to the data set that we have. And it's really important that we get as much as we can to make it as accurate as we can. So if we haven't had your responses in, this is my time to say, please, can we have them in? And if we have had them, thank you so much. That's all I have to say on State of the Sector at the moment. I'm going to pass you on to Michael, who's going to talk to you about advocacy, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Liz. Becky, can I just check, do we finish at past, or is it a bit later?
No, we're due to finish at 12, but
oh, great.
Any time we can get back before that, I'm sure people would appreciate. So Michael is our last person to talk about what we're doing in membership, and then we will take some questions.
Great, thanks, Becky. Yeah, so as I introduced before, I'm Michael, and I'm the Senior Policy and External Affairs Lead. So advocacy, which is what we're about to discuss now, is partly under my jurisdiction, although it's something that the whole organisation does contribute to, and particularly our senior leadership team spearhead in a lot of instances. So I think probably worth talking about what advocacy actually is and what we mean when we say it, just briefly before we dive into some of the details of what we do. So advocacy, what we mean when we say advocacy is basically our work to convince people with power to support our model and our sector. The type of work is also sometimes called, in other contexts, it's called influencing, policy, public affairs, and less commonly now, because it's got some negative connotations, lobbying, or the L word. Just a brief consideration of who it's aimed at. The type of work it's usually the government and its different decision-making branches, because they're the ones ultimately, well, certainly in our context, that hold power in relevant areas for shared lives. So this includes ministers and their civil servants in the relevant departments. And those departments include the DHSC, obviously, the Department of Health and Social Care, the Department for Work and Pensions, the DLHCLG, I think it's called, or it might have changed, but that's basically the Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government. And then beyond that, rather than just the sort of executive government itself, it will include engaging individual members of Parliament, members of Scottish Parliament and Welsh Assembly members. And at a sort of more detailed and applied level, it might include engaging arm's length organisations who deal with specific functions of the state or of the government. So it might be bodies like Job Centre Plus, Rent Smart Wales, and then of course the regulators, so the Care Quality Commission and the Care Inspectorates in the nations. So as well as what it is and who it's aimed at, just wanted to give a brief overview of how it's done and what we do when we undertake this work. And it's basically all about sort of building connections with the bodies and individuals that I mentioned before, and then trying to maintain those relationships to the extent that we are able to convince them ultimately to be able to come up with good solutions for the model. And that is done through a sort of whole variety of communications channels and means. Oftentimes it might mean writing to relevant bodies directly, meeting with them in person, and then also communicating through a series of formal channels that government and the civil service tend to create, especially in ways in which we can submit expert information. So it could be responses to consultations that the government have issued, responses to particular parliamentary inquiries, or select committee calls for evidence, for example. So we do all of that. Because we're small and with only limited resources, we often work together with bigger, broader, more powerful alliances and coalitions. So we're a member of, for example, the Care Provider Alliance. We also work in partnership with organisations such as TLAP, so Think Local Act Personal, and other organisations that we think and coalitions that we think embody the values that Shared Lives promotes, so around person-centred care, asset-based thinking, and all that sort of stuff, basically. So I just wanted to move on now to talk a bit about our main streams of work, of which I think there are two. You can broadly categorise it in two ways. So for the first, Becky, could I have my next slide, please? Yeah, so the first is around making the case for investment. And I don't want to be reductive, but you could arguably say that in terms of single pieces of the puzzle, that funding for the model is probably the single most important ingredient for helping it to grow and to flourish. So I know many people on this call probably really understand that investment is needed for growth, particularly in terms of recruiting more Shared Lives carers, raising awareness amongst people who could use Shared Lives, referral partners in other service branches and in other aspects of kind of public sector infrastructure, and obviously, and of course, social care leaders within local government who have a degree of autonomy about how social care is delivered in their area. And only central government can release this type of funding, really. And then there's also the consideration of the day-to-day funding for arrangements from social care budgets, which is absolutely vital. And in the context of an extremely sort of tight financial picture for local authority budgets, there is always work to do to convince local authorities to spend more of their budgets on Shared Lives and consequently less on other models. So in terms of our journey of winning investment into Shared Lives, you can probably take this back. So I've been at the organisation for about 8 years, and around that time, we're in the sort of nascent early stages of a simple outreach to individual members of Parliament, MPs in the UK government, in the UK Parliament, sorry. And we did that by hosting parliamentary receptions. So we would have every year for a couple of years running, we would have a parliamentary event at Westminster, which was basically like a kind of a big meeting with a couple of snacks, with a few speeches from key political supporters that we had, MPs that supported our model, and of course also testimony from people with lived experience from shared lives, both people supported and shared lives carers. In this, we would prepare, we'd basically invite a load of MPs. The couple of supporters in Parliament that we did have, we would use to try and leverage to try and get more MPs to come. The MPs themselves would speak, guided by us. We'd prepare talking points, but then obviously we'd let them speak about from their own experiences and their own sort of passion for the model and why they supported it and why others people should support it, and basically have shared lives carers and supported people making the same sort of case. So we did that for about 3 or 4 years, I think, on the run, and we built some interesting we garnered some interesting allies at the time. So we had who I think has retired from Parliament since, but he was a Liberal Democrat MP, was one of our first supporters. Les Kendall was one of our biggest supporters at that time and is now the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. So we hope that at some point we might be able to leverage that early relationship to try and smooth out some benefits issues in shared lives. But I've also had Kit Malthouse one year, who was a Conservative member of Parliament, who we didn't necessarily expect, but who ended up being quite a passionate and vocal supporter of us as well. So all of those relationships that we garnered then, we think there has been a sort of lineage from that to the type of support and success that we've had in very recent years. So we've also over the years always done things for Shared Lives Week, like letters to MPs and asking them to visit schemes on special occasions, like as I say, like Shared Lives Week. We have submitted, I think ones that I've submitted personally, and I know there have been more submitted by different colleagues in the organisation, but I've submitted about 15 or 10, between 10 and 15 consultation responses, submissions of evidence to select committee inquiries, and other types of calls for evidence. As the years went by, we were able to start engaging the Department for Health and Social Care directly as part of their agenda to reform social care. Social care reform and investment and support for the sector has been on the agenda for years. It's been in the media for years. It's been in the sort of public policy discussions for years. The extent to which it's actually been delivered or happened is obviously not been as extensive as we'd like, but the successive governments have been involved in a process of dialogue with the social care sector to see what they can do and how the sector should be reformed. And we've been able to take part of that process and have been able to speak to the government directly and promote Shared Lives as part of any new settlement for social care. That involved including meetings directly with the ministers for health and social care, and that culminated in the final in the last 2 years of the previous Conservative government's reign, the first ever mention in a government white paper of Shared Lives and home share. Basically a signal of intent from them that they were willing to invest in the model, but also that it was a sort of guidance. It was a guidance message, advising local government that Shared Lives was something that they ought to invest in and prioritise. And then all of this culminated in the first ever targeted investment into Shared Lives with the Accelerating Reform Fund, which was the last piece of concrete policy that the Conservative government enacted, the previous Conservative government enacted on social care. So that released significant funding into the social care sector alongside a menu of options and recommendations for what local government should invest the money in. And one of those was Shared Lives. So it was the first ever targeted specific investment into our model that's ever been achieved. So you can see there that there's from sort of quite humble beginnings and speaking to parliamentarians and reaching out to them just sort of in a low level way, and all the evidence and all the kind of case we've made over the years has basically culminated in probably the most success we've ever had in terms of winning support from the government. So if I could just move on to my next slide, Becky, just to talk about the second main stream of work that we do briefly, which is around.
Just a few more minutes, Michael.
No, it's only be a couple of minutes. So so this is around problem solving in specific areas of policy. So as I'm sure a lot of people are aware on this call, I don't need to tell anyone that although Shared Lives is a very simple concept in that it's about harnessing the power of relationships, basically, and the capacity of ordinary family homes to help people. In practice, it can be complex because it mixes public and private, formal and informal, regulated and unregulated, and family life, family and friendship, basically, with professional support. Because it's care in an ordinary family home, it rubs up against several different areas of law and often lands in sort of grey areas within them. So that includes care, regulations, law on housing and tenancy, benefits, mental capacity, and a lot more. So because of these grey areas that Shared Lives falls into, and because of the difficulty in pinpointing exactly what a particular area of law, regulation, or policy says that Shared Lives needs to do, not to mention whether the answer, when we do get it, it is optimal for Shared Lives, means that we need to and have needed to at several times engage people with power and decision makers to try to resolve specific problems for us, and to try and make the policy and regulatory landscape easier for the model to operate in. So I think the two of the most significant examples of this, and probably some of our most successful examples, have been during the COVID pandemic, when the government wanted to bring in mandatory pre-shift testing for all social care workers, which basically meant all social care workers would have needed to take a test and prove that it was negative before any shift, which for Shared Lives carers with living arrangements would have meant they'd need to test every single day of their lives just because they lived and worked at home. It would have been just fundamentally impractical and unfair. And we basically built a good channel of communication to the Department of Health and Social Care by this point, and managed to get Shared Lives carers an exemption from that. And then the big one during COVID was the policy of VCOD, or vaccination as a condition of deployment, which basically meant every social care worker would have needed to have the COVID vaccination, or else they wouldn't have been able to work. This was obviously, again, a really, really tricky subject area, because it was something that would have posed significant problems for people in Shared Lives. We basically consulted our membership on this, whether we basically felt this was a policy that we wanted to support, or whether that we wanted to counter. The result was extremely tight. It was the sort of Brexit split. I think 51% of people were against it and 49% people for, but we had to go with the majority. And we basically made a very, I think, very coherent and powerful argument to the DHSC, which was around supporting people's rights. It ultimately came down to, if a living Shared Lives carer didn't have the vaccine and was forced to stop working, then that would mean that the supported person they lived with would be forced to leave their home, which was basically a breach of their Article 8 rights to home life, private family and home life. And eventually we won the concession from the government that they basically would apply this, but Shared Lives carers would be exempt. And then eventually they dropped the policy in general, possibly because other organisations and other pressures, including ours, made them see that it wasn't viable. And then we've worked on a whole host of other issues like this, changes to housing law, which could have made it more difficult for shared lives arrangements to end flexibly. We're constantly looking into the issue of protecting the self-employment status of shared lives carers. We're currently involved in dialogue with the government around the agenda for fair pay for social care, and we're trying to take the lead on how that can include self-employed shared lives carers, and a whole host of other things. So yeah, that's basically it from me. And yeah, if you'd ever like to know more about any of this, of course, you can get in touch with me directly, because I recognise that it can be quite complicated, and yeah, there's lots to discuss. So thanks for that.
Michael, thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the main part of the presentation. Thank you for joining us. I can't see, were there any questions in the chat, Kathy? I can stop sharing and then I should be able to see everybody again. Is Kathy there? Have she disappeared?
Sorry, I was on mute and shaking my head, which is not helpful when you can't see me. No, there are no questions.
Okie dokie, no worries. So just to let everybody know, we're going to be posting the recording of this webinar on our website, and I will be sending the link around to everybody afterwards. If you do have any questions, then you can just email us. Kathy's going to pop our membership email address into the chat. We'll also be sharing the slides around and any other useful links that we can think of. But thank you very, very much, everybody, for joining us. Oh, thanks, Carol. And we will see you all hopefully tomorrow. So tomorrow we have the Celebrating Positive Outcomes in Shared Lives celebratory hour with Ewan King, our CEO, and 3 of our ambassadors, Heather from Scotland, Gracie, who is our brand new ambassador, and oh, I can't remember who the other one is. It's Heather, Gracie, and Hope. So please do join us for that tomorrow. I will be sending around the link for that as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care all.